The story begins in Florence, Italy. The year is 1469. Florence at this time was not just a city. It was a battlefield of ideas, art, and ruthless politics. This was the birthplace of the Renaissance, where Michelangelo carved marble into living flesh, where Leonardo da Vinci sketched flying machines centuries ahead of his time. But behind this glittering culture was a world of constant betrayals, assassinations, and wars between rival families. Into this dangerous world was born Machiavelli. He was not born into wealth or nobility. His family had status but little money. This meant that from a young age, had to rely on his wits rather than privilege. His sharp mind was his only weapon. Florence was a city where survival depended on strategy, and Machiavelli quickly learned how unpredictable life could be. By the late 1400s, Florence was controlled by the Medici family, one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe. But Florence was also a republic, at least in name, and political power constantly shifted. The Medici were expelled in 1494, and a short-lived republic rose in their place. It was during this time that the young Machiavelli found his opportunity. At just 29 years old, he became a high-ranking diplomat for the Florentine Republic. His job was dangerous. He negotiated with kings, popes, and ruthless warlords. Imagine the scenes he witnessed. The French armies storming through Italy. Cesare Borgia, the infamous son of Pope Alexander VI, leading brutal campaigns to seize power. The Pope himself acting not as a holy man, but as a cunning politician. Machiavelli saw all of this up close, and he understood something. In this world, kindness was weakness, and hesitation meant death. Among all the figures he met, one man impressed Machiavelli more than any other: Cesare Borgia. Cesare was handsome, charming, and utterly ruthless. He was the perfect example of Machiavelli's ideal prince: bold, decisive, and unafraid to spill blood to secure his power. Machiavelli admired him not for his morality, but for his effectiveness. Cesare taught him that fortune favors those who act boldly, even recklessly. This lesson would become the foundation of Machiavelli's philosophy. But fortune is fickle. Cesare rose quickly and fell just as fast. When his father, Pope Alexander VI, died suddenly, Cesare lost his power overnight. His enemies struck back, and the man who once seemed unstoppable was left broken. For Machiavelli, this was proof of another truth: power is fragile, and only those who adapt can survive. For a decade, Machiavelli served Florence faithfully. He organized its defenses, negotiated with foreign powers, and worked tirelessly for the Republic. But history turned against him. In 1512, the Medici family returned to power, and they saw Machiavelli as their enemy. He was arrested, accused of conspiracy, and even tortured. He was stretched on the rack, his body pulled apart, but he never confessed. He was finally released. He was broken, disgraced, and exiled to the countryside. The man who once walked with kings and popes was now forced to live in a small farm. Writing letters and drinking cheap wine in a tavern, most men would have given up. But Machiavelli was not like most men. In exile, he began to write, poured all of his knowledge, his pain, and his ruthless observations of human nature into a book that would change the world: The Prince. This was not a book of ideals. It was not a dream of how rulers should behave. It was a manual of survival, a brutal handbook for power. In The Prince, Machiavelli argued that rulers must be willing to lie, to deceive, and to act without mercy. He declared that it is better to be feared than loved, because fear is a stronger bond than affection. He wrote that morality must often be set aside because power is the true foundation of political success. To his enemies, this was proof that he was evil. To his supporters, it was proof that he was honest. And to us, 500 years later, it remains one of the most shocking books ever written. Think of Machiavelli in his small study, scratching his quill by candlelight. Outside, Florence glittered with art and wealth. Inside, he wrote words so dangerous that they would be banned by the church, condemned by scholars, and yet secretly read by kings, dictators, and presidents for centuries. He had lost everything: his career, his reputation, his freedom. And yet in that exile, he created something far more powerful, an idea that could never be silenced. Machiavelli had discovered a truth that was as dark as it was undeniable. The world does not reward the wise. It rewards the bold, the reckless, and yes, sometimes the fools. When Machiavelli sat down in exile to write The Prince, he was not writing poetry, nor philosophy, nor theology. He was writing a weapon. The book was short, direct, and terrifyingly honest. Unlike the philosophers of his time, who spoke of justice, virtue, and the ideal state, Machiavelli stripped politics to its naked truth. Power is survival, and survival requires cruelty. The Prince begins with a simple idea. Rulers do not live in a world of how things should be. They live in a world of how things are. And in the real world, people are greedy, fickle, and selfish. Promises are broken, allies betray you, and the crowd will cheer you one day and curse you the next. So what must a ruler do? Machiavelli's answer is brutal. Do whatever it takes. If lying preserves your power, lie. If violence secures your state, kill. If mercy weakens you, abandon it. Moral ideals, he argued, are luxuries. A ruler's first duty is not to be good, but to be effective. One of Machiavelli's most famous lessons is that a ruler must be both a lion and a fox. The lion is strength, feared by enemies, impossible to ignore. The fox is cunning, clever, deceptive, able to outwit traps. If you are only a lion, you will be crushed by deception. If you are only a fox, you will be destroyed by force. To survive, a ruler must be both. This idea was revolutionary. For centuries, leaders had been told to model themselves after saints, guided by morality. Machiavelli tore down that illusion and replaced it with animals, predators, hunters, survivors. Perhaps the most infamous line in The Prince is this: "It is better to be feared than loved." Why? Because love depends on the people, and people are unreliable. But fear is within the control of the ruler. Yet Machiavelli added something crucial. A ruler must never be hated. Fear keeps subjects obedient. Hatred drives them to rebellion. The art of power lies in balancing terror with stability. This insight has been repeated by dictators and presidents for centuries. From Stalin to Napoleon, from corporate boardrooms to political campaigns, the lesson remains. Fear lasts longer than affection. To prove his point, Machiavelli used real examples. None fascinated him more than Cesare Borgia, the ruthless son of Pope Alexander VI. But Caesar's downfall was equally instructive. When his father died unexpectedly, fortune turned against him. Suddenly powerless, Cesar was betrayed and destroyed by his enemies. For Machiavelli, this was the greatest lesson of all. Fortune can change in an instant. A wise ruler prepares for disaster, because luck alone cannot sustain power. When The Prince began to circulate, it horrified the world. To the church, it was blasphemy. To moral philosophers, it was a betrayal of ethics. To ordinary readers, it was terrifying, because it revealed what rulers truly thought behind closed doors. The Catholic Church condemned the book, placing it on the index of prohibited books. For centuries, priests warned against its corrupting influence, and yet rulers everywhere secretly read it. Kings, dukes, generals, all wanted to know the secrets within. Napoleon Bonaparte studied it. Mussolini adored it. Even modern presidents and CEOs echo its principles, sometimes without realizing it. Machiavelli had written a book that no one dared admit reading, but no one could ignore. The word Machiavellian soon entered the language. It came to mean cunning, deceitful, ruthless. To be Machiavellian was to place power above morality, strategy above honor. But here's the irony. Machiavelli never said rulers must be evil. He said rulers must be effective. If kindness works, use kindness. If deception works, use deception. His philosophy was not about cruelty for its own sake. It was about survival. Still, his honesty was so shocking that his name became a synonym for villainy. To this day, people use Machiavellian as an insult without realizing the deeper truths behind his words. Why has The Prince survived for over 500 years? Because it describes something eternal, human nature. Think about it. Politics, in business, Even in everyday life, we still see the same patterns Machiavelli described. Promises broken, alliances betrayed, power won and lost through bold, ruthless action. He forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Beneath the surface of civilization, the struggle for power never changes. Imagine yourself in Renaissance Florence, secretly reading a banned copy of The Prince by candlelight. Every page feels like a confession of how the world really works. It strips away illusions, exposing the machinery of power. That is why The Prince was, and still is, the most dangerous book ever written. It does not tell us how we wish the world to be. It tells us how the world is. And that truth is something most people are too afraid to face. When people first read The Prince, they assumed it was only a book for kings and generals. But the truth is far darker. Machiavelli was describing all of us, because politics doesn't just happen in palaces or parliaments. It happens in offices, schools, companies, friendships, and even families. Wherever humans gather, power is at play. Machiavelli's lessons apply everywhere. One of Machiavelli's most unsettling insights was this: people are not as rational as we think. They are easily deceived, easily manipulated, and often prefer comforting lies over harsh truths. A wise ruler knows this. Here lies the secret. Sometimes the fool, the clown, or the manipulator succeeds, not despite their foolishness, but because of it. Why? Because the crowd does not want complexity. They want entertainment. They want promises. They want someone who makes them feel safe, even if it's an illusion. And so, throughout history, fools have often risen higher than philosophers. Machiavelli warned that a ruler must appear virtuous, even if he is not. Appearances matter more than reality. This is the mask of power. A ruler may be cruel behind closed doors, but in public, he must appear merciful. He may be greedy, but he must appear generous. He may be faithless, but he must appear pious. The masses, Machiavelli argued, cannot see the truth. They see only the mask. In modern times, this lesson is everywhere. Politicians stage photo ops at churches. CEOs smile on magazine covers while crushing competitors behind the scenes. Influencers preach authenticity while carefully scripting every detail of their online persona. The mask is often more powerful than reality itself. Think about the honest leader. The one who refuses to lie, who tells the truth, even when it is unpopular. What happens to them? Usually they fail. The crowd abandons them. Rivals exploit their openness. Their truth becomes a weakness. Meanwhile, the fool who says what people want to hear rises higher. Machiavelli understood this cruel paradox. He did not celebrate it, but he exposed it. This is why his ideas feel so relevant today. The age of information has not killed deception. It has multiplied it. Every day, millions of masks compete for attention, and the loudest, boldest, or most entertaining mask often wins. Another of Machiavelli's lessons was about fortune. He compared fortune to a violent river that can flood and destroy everything. Cannot stop it, but you can build defenses, prepare, and act boldly when the moment comes. And yet, fortune often rewards not the wisest, but the boldest. The person willing to take risks, to gamble, to break the rules, even if they seem foolish, sometimes outpaces the careful strategist. History is full of reckless leaders who gambled everything and won. For every cautious statesman who faded into obscurity, there is a reckless conqueror who carved his name into history. This is why Machiavelli said, "Fortune is like a woman. She favors the daring, not the timid." Look around our modern world. Fools dominate headlines. Reality show stars become presidents. Shallow slogans win elections. Viral memes sway public opinion more than carefully reasoned arguments. Why? Because Machiavelli was right. People are driven more by perception than truth, by emotion more than reason. In this sense, the future belongs to fools, or at least to those who understand how to play the fool when it suits them. The true genius of Machiavelli's philosophy is that it explains why those we consider unworthy often rise, while the truly wise remain unheard. Does this mean wisdom is useless? Not at all. But Machiavelli's dark legacy is this: wisdom alone is not enough. To survive, to thrive, to lead, wisdom must be combined with cunning. The wise man who refuses to adapt is crushed. The fool who plays the game of power may rise. Survivor is the one who blends both. wisdom hidden beneath the mask of foolishness, strategy disguised as simplicity. This is why so many great leaders appear underestimated at first. They play weak, they play foolish, and when the moment is right, they strike. So why say the future belongs to fools? Because in a world drowning in noise, the loudest voice often wins. Who entertains, who simplifies, who distracts, captures the crowd. The fool who knows he is a fool can rule the stage. But the wise man who refuses to wear the mask will fade into silence. Machiavelli forces us to face this truth. History does not always belong to the most just, the most noble, or the most intelligent. It belongs to those who seize power, by whatever means necessary. And in an age where appearance matters more than reality, that often means the fool triumphs over the sage. Machiavelli's legacy is not comfortable. We want to believe that truth wins, that honesty prevails, that wisdom rules the future. But history shows us otherwise. From emperors to presidents, from business tycoons to social media stars, the world rewards cunning more than virtue, spectacle more than substance. That is the dangerous, chilling, and timeless truth Machiavelli revealed. The future does not belong to the wisest. It belongs to those who master perception. And sometimes, that means the future belongs to fools. When we think of Machiavelli, we imagine a man of cunning, a master of power, the cold author of The Prince. But history often forgets this. Machiavelli died not as a ruler, not as a feared advisor, but as an exile, stripped of office, disgraced, and longing for a return to politics that never came. This is the great tragedy of his life. The man who taught rulers how to survive could not save himself. In Florence, Machiavelli rose quickly. For nearly 14 years, he served the Florentine Republic as a top diplomat. He negotiated with kings. He sat across from popes. He dealt with mercenaries and generals. He was not just a thinker, he was a man of action. He believed in a strong citizen army, in republican government, in the idea that Florence could resist the corruption of foreign powers. But then fortune turned. In 1512, the powerful Medici family returned to Florence. The Republic collapsed. Medici, whom Machiavelli had opposed, now ruled again. Enemies never forget. When the Medici came to power, Machiavelli was accused of conspiring against them, was arrested, thrown into prison, and tortured. We know from records that he endured the strapito, a brutal method where the prisoner's arms were tied behind his back. Then he was hoisted into the air by a rope, his shoulders dislocating under his own weight. Imagine the agony. Imagine the humiliation. This was the fate of the man who once spoke with kings. Eventually he was released, not because he was proven innocent, but because of a political pardon. But he was broken. He was banned from office. His career was over. Machiavelli retreated to his small farm outside Florence. He was 43 years old. A man who had tasted the center of power, now reduced to writing letters, farming, and drinking wine with neighbors. In one famous letter to a friend, he described his daily life. By day, he wore rough clothes and worked with peasants. By night, he would put on fine robes, sit in his study, and enter the company of the ancients. Reading the great historians and philosophers, conversing with their ideas, this was his exile. Half peasant, half philosopher. It was during this time that he wrote The Prince. Many people imagine The Prince as a cold manual of tyranny. When you see the context, it feels different. Here was a man cast out of politics, desperate to return, offering his knowledge to the Medici, the very family that had ruined him. He dedicated The Prince to Lorenzo de' Medici, hoping it would win him favor, hoping he would be invited back into the halls of power. But the Medici ignored him. The book was not published until years later after his death. At the time, it did not save him. Here lies the greatest irony. Machiavelli taught rulers how to hold on to power at all costs. Yet he himself was powerless. He taught deception, yet his own motives were seen as untrustworthy. He wrote of fortune favoring the bold, yet in his own life, fortune betrayed him. The master of power died without power. In his last years, Machiavelli continued to write histories, plays, reflections on politics, but he never again held office. He remained on the outside looking in while others ruled. In 1527, when Florence briefly overthrew the Medici once again, Machiavelli thought his moment had come. Finally, the Republic had returned. Surely they would call him back. But they did not. His reputation was too damaged, his loyalty too doubted. A few weeks later, he fell ill, and he died at the age of 58, bitter and disappointed. So the man who gave the world its most infamous book on power died in obscurity, but his words did not. The prince spread across Europe, shocking, outraging, fascinating generations of readers. Some called him the teacher of evil. Others saw him as the first realist, the first man brave enough to tell the truth about politics. But Machiavelli himself never lived to see his influence. He died not as the feared Machiavellian mastermind we imagine, but as a failed politician, in exile, a man who longed for power but never regained it. What do we learn from this tragic end? Perhaps that even the sharpest mind cannot always overcome fortune. Perhaps that the truths of power do not protect the one who speaks them. Or perhaps, most ironically of all, that the man who taught rulers to trust no one was himself never trusted. Machiavelli's life is a reminder. Power is cruel, fortune is fickle, and no one, not even its greatest student, can master it forever.